SpongicX here, and I want to share my thoughts on the SpongeBob spin-off movie exclusive to Netflix, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. So there's quite a crazy story to go with this already crazy film. So as of January 21st, I think it was, 2024, the movie somehow got leaked in its entirety onto the internet, and of course it was taken down like not long after. But yeah, it's crazy because we haven't even gotten a trailer for this movie yet, or even an official release date, aside from an early 2024 release. Yeah, it's going to make things a lot more complicated for release now that Nickelodeon knows that people already know about it. Admittedly, I actually watched it while it was available, but hey, can you really call it stealing if I'm already paying for a paid subscription for Netflix? So, I mean, the movie's going to end up on there sooner or later. So, I just decided to watch it before it left. I wanted to do a review for it, but as of recording for this video, I'm not releasing this video until I know for sure that the movie is officially released, unless Nickelodeon for some reason canceled it, because, I mean, the reason behind this leak is such a mystery. People are wondering, like, did the person who leaked it, was he like someone who was about to be fired from Nickelodeon? This was like a rebellious act they did before leaving? Or was the movie canceled and someone decided to just release it because they didn't want it to end up like the Warner Discovery movies that got canceled and never to see the light of day, you know? It's hard to say. Either way, a lot of people were bashing this movie. Like, when the leak came out, people were bashing it, saying the movie was mid. There are a few scenes that people did like, especially people on the internet might have seen like the part where Fred says free in slow motion, the way it knocks out Mr. Krabs. It is a pretty funny scene, but the one scene that everyone was trashing from this movie was a really bad joke that SpongeBob made about like streaming services. Like, there's a part where Bikini Bottom's taken. He's more worried that he can't watch his streaming shows on demand instead of worrying about his friends. You know, a lot of people said not only is it a bad joke that really feels like Netflix forced that message in to promote their services, but it felt very out of character coming from SpongeBob of all people. And so yeah, a lot of people were trashing the movie for its humor, and a lot of people are also saying this is a fetish fuel movie, and yeah, I gotta admit, there are parts in this that are really questionable. This movie has sickening imagery from inflation to even tickle torture. Not tickle torture, but foot tickling, because there's a part where SpongeBob's running around a human swimming pool, and he's tickling people's feet and laughing. And yeah, that was kind of creepy. Despite all these negatives, a lot of people are bashing the film, and when I saw it, though, I do admit this movie is a mixed mess of a movie, but I honestly found it to be a guilty pleasure. Ever since I first saw the first SpongeBob movie, I loved the Shell City segment. The idea of seeing SpongeBob and Patrick running around on the surface while still being cartoon characters, giving it the old Roger Rabbit effect, that was really cool. Like, we've always seen in the show how the live-action world was always represented by, like, cheap live-action footage or live-action photorealistic effects hopping around the screen and very fake imagery, you know. And so I liked how the SpongeBob movie took it an extra step. They gave it film quality, and yeah, that was really cool. But one thing that disappointed me about the first SpongeBob movie was, why wasn't Sandy really a big part of the movie? I mean, with SpongeBob and Patrick going to land, it felt like it would have been cool to have Sandy join them on the journey. I mean, to be fair, they didn't know that they were heading to land to begin with, because, you know, they didn't know that Shell City was above the surface after all, but still, it would have been cool if Sandy was there to help guide them when they felt lost, like, up on the surface. And you know, Sandy was always like one of SpongeBob's best friends. Not only in that movie, but even in the second movie, despite how it included more of the other characters, I still felt like Sandy got the short end of the stick compared to the other characters. Even their superpowers, like Sandy's was really lame. She was just a live-action photorealistic squirrel that kept getting knocked out too easily. And I mean, to be fair, all the heroes in that were pretty much a joke, but I don't know. I still thought the others had cooler appearances or powers compared to Sandy just being a big squirrel. That was it. And so, admittedly, they did give Sandy a slightly better role in the third movie, but the third movie was kind of underwhelming. And so, the fact that they finally gave Sandy a movie and it's exactly something of, not exactly, but it is something I somewhat envisioned, but not quite. And I felt like after I reviewed this film, I would share my thoughts on how I would have made a movie like this, because for years I wanted to see a live action animated hybrid movie of Sandy having to go back to Texas for some reason, and SpongeBob joins her on a wild adventure. And the fact that we finally got a movie that takes place in Texas with SpongeBob accompanying Sandy, and except it doesn't quite go the direction I would have wanted it, because the way I wanted it, it would have been more of an action-packed, like, adventure kind of film with a lot of comedy sprinkled in, and I wanted it to have sprinkles of Sandy's backstory exposed, and we'd get to meet Sandy's family and stuff like that. And surprisingly, a few of those elements do make it into the actual Sandy Cheeks movie, but not quite the way I would have fleshed it out, you know. But another major complaint people have about this movie are the visual effects, mainly the CGI, and I gotta admit, it's all over the place. I think for the most part, the characters look fine, and their expressions and animations are really good, but it's the blending with, like, the realistic CGI backgrounds and a few other CG effects that look really off, but like, a lot of people particularly have a problem with the main villain. Like, there's a part where, towards the end, where a reveal of her has a lot of CGI effects, and a lot of people are trashing it. Or she even had a flashback to when she was a little girl, and they just took the actress's head and just, like, did some really bad CG effects over a little girl's body, and a lot of people are wondering why they did that. And so a lot of people are trashing the film for its questionable visuals, but to be fair, SpongeBob's visuals when it came to live action was never good to begin with. Look at the early series, like whenever they had like live action photorealistic cutouts of like human sea creatures just hopping around the screen, like it's like during the Texas episode, during Sandy's Texas song, how you saw like photorealistic squirrels that were supposed to be Sandy when she's up on the surface, and it's like it was never realistic. It was always cheap effects, and so all of a sudden people are making fun of it or saying like, why did they give the old show a pass, but then when they do it in CGI, oh, that's going too far. I honestly think people are overreacting, and that people are saying this is a theatrical movie, and no, it was technically a straight-to-TV movie made for Netflix, so it's somewhere in between a TV movie and a theatrical movie. It's got a higher budget and quality than a TV film, but it's not quite theatrical quality. It's somewhere in between. And I felt like for a Netflix movie, it was alright. I mean, the effects were pretty bad, but they're not like knockoff movie bad, It's not like something you'd see in a bargain bin at a Walmart or anything. The film opens up, admittedly, kind of questionable, not very good, in other words, where Sandy emerges from her tree dome. She starts singing a song about how she's a land creature who lives underwater as all the other sea creatures join her on her musical number. And the song itself is not very good. There are some neat little animations here and there, though. But right away, though, a lot of people are going to be like, what the heck is going on? Suddenly, Sandy has a mechanical horse named Sparky. And don't worry, though, he's not in the film for very long. But at the same time, a lot of people are questioning, like, who is this horse? What is this horse? Why is it here? It comes across that, like, Nickelodeon felt like this movie needed a marketable gimmick. I mean, they've done it with other Nickelodeon movies, like the Rugrats movie had the Reptar wagon, the Spongebob movie had the Patty wagon, and so for the Sandy Cheeks movie, a mechanical horse named Sparky. Except, what was the point of this character? It really felt like Nickelodeon mandated that they had to have like some kind of gimmicky character who could sell toys or hype kids into wanting to watch it for some reason. And I can tell like it's like the animators or crew behind the movie just didn't give a care. And so they just made this mechanical horse, just put him in the intro, a little bit at the end, and then just scrapped him through the rest of the movie. It's like, there, we made your mechanical marketing ploy. Now, let's get on with the movie. And you can tell there were a lot of ideas that must have been scrapped from this movie, because the movie is a very disjointed mess at times. But yeah, why did they put so much effort into creating like this robotic horse character if he doesn't amount to anything? But personally, I'm just glad that he didn't have a big role in the movie. But you still can't help but question, why was he even here to begin with? The movie would have just been better off not introducing this character. it added nothing to the film. It's like you think they would have at least saved it for like an action-packed climax. I mean, it's only used for a little bit at the beginning when Bikini Bottom is suddenly being abducted, and so Sandy rides Sparky, and she captures SpongeBob and rides him to safety. That's all Sparky is used for. Suddenly, he gets cut in half, and his later half is like captured with the rest of Bikini Bottom and taken to the surface by a giant tractor claw, and so Sandy and SpongeBob have to adventure off to the surface to get it back, and Sparky stays behind until they can return with his butt, basically. And yeah, what was the point of Sparky? It makes no sense. And so, yeah, like I said, Bikini Bottom got abducted, and Sandy notices that on the claw that took them, it said Boots on it, and she recognizes that Boots is the company she works for, and she's questioning why they abducted Bikini Bottom, and she tries contacting two of her co-workers who happen to be humans, and she isn't able to get a hold of them, but she gets a message about the project that's currently going on at Boots and how it's being run by like a new manager named Tsunami. And so Sandy is puzzled by this, and she decides that she's going to adventure to Texas herself and not only find out what's going on, but rescue Bikini Bottom, and SpongeBob tags along with her. It's like, I was shocked to see that at first, because it's like, oh, that's part one of the movies I've always wanted to see as a kid. A movie where Sandy and SpongeBob adventure through Texas. And it's like, oh, finally, we're getting a movie like that. Closest thing we got to it was that terrible episode tease called Rodeo Days, where SpongeBob thought Sandy was in trouble because she said she's going to a rodeo, and that was an awful episode. Don't remind me of that. Like, ugh. Such an underwhelming episode. It's like it had potential and it wasted it. It's like, this is an idea that should have been saved for a movie. But yeah, so SpongeBob and Sandy, they manage to ride like a geyser while riding clams to surf the geyser up to the surface. And Sandy reveals suddenly that she's a flying squirrel as she gets out of her air suit and pulls out her wings. Not wings, but like the gliders, the arm flaps that flying squirrels have. And so SpongeBob rides on her back as she glides him on top of an airplane to hitch a ride to Texas. And so throughout the movie, we get many cutbacks to, meanwhile, what's going on at Boots' laboratory. Apparently, the laboratory is also part of a water park. And so we see how there's a plan run by this woman named Tsunami, played by Wanda Sykes, and I honestly had no idea it was her until the credits revealed it. I just didn't recognize her looking like a RuPaul drag queen, and I didn't even recognize her voice. And, it's like, I'm usually familiar with her voice. Like, she's the voice of Stella the Skunk from Over the Hedge, or Bessie the Cow from Barnyard, but I did not recognize her in this movie until the credits point out it was her. And so she's the main villain of this movie, and she has this crazy plan where she wants to feed like these sea creatures something that'll allow them to breathe air, and then after that she wants to put them in a machine that will duplicate them into many miniature clones, which she plans to sell to kids and stuff like that. And so like she has like a little commercial that shows like how there's all these little cartoony sea creatures, and she wants to sell them so kids can play with them and hug them. And it's like, I can understand the cloning part, but what was the deal with having to force them to breathe air first in order for the cloning to work? I felt like the writers could have done a better job at making this plan less complicated. It especially gets more complicated during the climax of the movie when SpongeBob and Sandy finally catch up to the lab. But before that, so throughout the movie, we see the plan taking effect where they finally feed everyone, and the scientists decide to use Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward as their first test subjects. So they force them to go through some kind of conversion that allows them to breathe air. Again, it makes things a little more complicated when SpongeBob and Sandy finally meet up. So meanwhile, we see Sandy and SpongeBob, they are they're about to glide towards the water park, but they get sucked up by a tornado and are sent further back. And throughout the movie, there's a lot of inconsistencies with how SpongeBob is able to breathe. Like earlier when they were on the airplane, Sandy introduces SpongeBob to a concoction she made, some kind of lotion that allows him to breathe air temporarily. But then it's like right after they try landing into the water park, they get blown away by a tornado, and after that, they're stranded in a desert. And SpongeBob starts dehydrating instantly, and so Sandy tells him to relax because there's a lot of water in the desert as she hydrates him with cactus juice. And so after that, though, we don't see any other scenes of SpongeBob replenishing himself with water. And so, and eventually when they do catch up to the lab, they grab SpongeBob and they try cloning him, but they didn't feed him the thing he needed in order to breathe air. So I really don't know. It's like I said, this movie, it has some interesting ideas, but the execution is really poor. They forget or gloss over a lot of details, so it makes the movie a very messy story. So SpongeBob and Sandy try to continue further on their journey through the desert, but they get ambushed by a bunch of snakes, and Sandy dons her Kill Bill outfit from the Karate Island episode, and she fights off some of the snakes to protect SpongeBob. However, she gets bit by one of them, and she swells up to a DeviantArt ridiculous level. So all of a sudden, she does like this weird twist with her fingers, and she blows into it, making a whistle, which summons her family. And so, yeah, this marks the first time in SpongeBob history, aside from a picture cameo in like a certain episode of one of the later seasons, but this is the first time we actually get to see and meet Sandy's family. And so we see her dad, voiced by Craig Robinson, and then most of the rest of her family are, I kid you not, are voiced by Grey DeLisle. I think this is the first time Grey DeLisle ever had a voice role in a SpongeBob property, which is shocking because, she's in like almost anything Nickelodeon related, and so yeah, it's shocking how it makes you go like, this is the first time she's done a voice for someone in SpongeBob. But she plays Sandy's mom, Sandy's two little sisters, and Sandy's grandma. And then we got Sandy's twin brother Randy, who was actually mentioned in the episode Rodeo Days as Sandy's twin brother. And he's voiced by Johnny Knoxville, and this marks the second time that Knoxville voiced a character in SpongeBob. Yeah, then her older sister Rosie is not in this movie, but you could maybe say that maybe it's because she moved out of the family, because it's revealed that Sandy's family is actually a traveling squirrel circus. Now, admittedly, that really threw me off, because I always imagined Sandy's family being like rodeo stars, ranchers, like I imagine them living on a farm or a ranch, and so to find out that they're a traveling circus, yeah, that was quite shocking. Despite how underdeveloped the characters were, I did think Sandy's family were a fun addition to the movie. It was great to finally see Sandy's family, and they had a pretty cute and wholesome dynamic, but I'll get further onto why I found it underwhelming later on in the review. And so, yeah, Sandy's family comes in, they fight off the snakes, they suck out Sandy's venom, and they give them a ride in their van towards the water park and all that. And so we see SpongeBob getting along really well with Randy, as Randy tries teaching SpongeBob how to do the Cheeks family whistle that Sandy used to summon them earlier. And we get like a moment where Sandy is looking over like all these posters of like her and her family in their act in the past, and so Sandy's like reflecting on her past, and her mom's trying to encourage her to come back and rejoin the circus, and Sandy's telling them how she can't. And so you think like there would be some kind of family dynamic, like one of them doesn't agree with Sandy's life to live underwater, but no, we don't get any of that. Although Sandy's mom tried welcoming her back into enjoying the circus life, it's like when Sandy refuses, the mom, tells her that she respects her life choices. And so it's like, it's kind of relieving that we don't have to have any forced family drama that makes everything so negative and moody, but at the same time, it's like, it just feels like they wasted potential for good storytelling here. It almost makes you wonder what was the point in including Sandy's family, aside from being a deus ex machina during a few scenes. They're just here to basically bail Sandy and SpongeBob out of situations. That's all they're really used for. they were still, they were still fun and entertaining characters. Like I can imagine little kids being entertained by Sandy's family with their acrobatics and fast-paced antics and all that. But yeah, I felt like they could have done more with them. And so, meanwhile, we get like a crazy chase scene where a ridiculous amount of like police officers in both cars and helicopters start chasing the van. And we get like a really bad joke of how Randy said he stole a bunch of nuts and loaded them in the back. So, yeah, I don't know. I didn't find it very funny. It's like, oh, haha, they're trying to reference that he stole drugs or something. But it's like they're acorns. How are acorns, supposed to be used to relate to like a drug joke or something? It wasn't very funny. Admittedly, the chase itself was pretty fun, and it did kind of get a few laughs out of me. But so Sandy's parents, they load Sandy and SpongeBob inside of the circus cannon, and they aim them towards the water park and fire them out to get them out safely. And so, once again, SpongeBob and Sandy are back onto the adventure, and they land in the water park. We get a creepy scene of SpongeBob tickling people's feet while running through the pool, but we get another funny chase scene as Tsunami's pet Pug starts chasing SpongeBob and Sandy, and so Sandy then reveals that this is exactly why she left to live in the ocean. And I don't know, I found that kind of underwhelming. I always wanted a more personal and possibly emotional reason for why Sandy left to live in Bikini Bottom. Instead, they used it on a joke of, oh, because dogs chase squirrels up on the surface. That's the whole reason she moved, just to get away from dogs. I found that kind of underwhelming. Admittedly, the chase scene with the pug was really fun, though, and I couldn't help but laugh at the scene where, so they run up like a water slide, but the pug manages to catch up with them. So Sandy once again pulls out her glider arms, and she and SpongeBob start gliding to safety, but then they turn around and see the pug is after them, and it's riding a hang glider. And that gave me probably the biggest laugh out of the whole film. It just came out of nowhere, and I like how, I'm not saying that it doesn't look like they didn't use CGI, but I like how for most of the scenes, it looks like they actually used a real dog during these scenes. And, so yeah, that was pretty funny. And so the pug manages to chase them through the sewers, and Sandy and SpongeBob follow one of the pipes until it leads them into the kitchen sink of, not the kitchen sink, but the lab sink inside the laboratory. And so they manage to find Bikini Bottom and SpongeBob reunites with his friends and all that. And as they try figuring out a way to free everyone, SpongeBob gets captured and he gets put on this little roller coaster that will lead him straight to the cloning machine. And like I said, he didn't eat that thing he was supposed to be fed in order to start breathing air, which they made it sound like it was necessary for him to be cloned. And so, yeah, this movie just forgets so many details that it presented. And so, when Sandy realizes what's going on, she attacks Tsunami. But, so we see Sandy, like, attacking Sue, just like a squirrel would in real life, just like running around a person, scurrying, climbing all around them, going in and out of their shirt and stuff like that. And you think Sandy would have noticed something off when doing that, and you'll see what I mean really soon. But so, eventually, Sue is able to grab Sandy, and she locks her into a lab rat cage. Sandy asks why Sue's doing all this, and Sue reveals a backstory of how when she was a little girl, she loved sea creatures so much that she just wanted to hug and cuddle them. However, the thing with sea creatures is that they can't survive on land. They will die. And so she's been trying endlessly to find a way to make, sea creatures be able to breathe on the surface, and she wants a way to be able to duplicate them and sell them so everyone can love sea creatures just as much as she did. And she reveals how all the years of research decayed her body. And so she takes off her lab coat and reveals that everything but her head is animatronic. And so this is what I mentioned when I said how a lot of people were bashing the CGI in this film, especially when it came to the main villain. A lot of people are saying it's like Shark Boy and Lava Girl levels of bad CGI. And so Sue, she thanks Sandy and saying none of this would have happened if it weren't for her in all of her research. And so Sandy's at a moment of defeat when she realizes that all of Bikini Bottom saw and heard that. And she feels ashamed, trying to apologize and claiming she didn't know her research was being used like this. And again, I feel like the scene would have been more emotional and shocking if the movie didn't reveal at the beginning that Boots was the company Sandy worked for. I wish they had it where they should have introduced it where Sandy was hiding something. She recognized like the name Boots, and she goes like, "Boots, what are they up to?" Or instead she goes like, "Boots, that's the company I work for," and then she had to flat out spell it out for SpongeBob who they are. And yeah, I feel like they should have hid that detail at the beginning to make this reveal more shocking. But so we see how everyone they're disappointed with Sandy. Luckily, they weren't mad at her. Usually in any other movie, this is where everyone would start hating the character. Instead, they're understandably upset or disappointed. Like they lower their heads and their eyes get bigger and more shinier. It's like they're just saddened to hear this. They're not angry with Sandy though, and so we get this really trippy and really creepy scene where SpongeBob ends up getting divided into many multiplicated copies and stuff like that, and we see like pieces of him falling off as they keep spreading into smaller little SpongeBobs that keep laughing in high-pitched voices, and SpongeBob's like starting to lose his memories while all this is happening until he explodes in what could otherwise be considered a gory mess, but like in a kid-friendly form, as we just see like many versions of him gushing out like blood. And yeah, it's a really messed up scene. And fun fact, though, was that this was part of a storyboard that was leaked a few years ago. I remember how people were spreading it around, and YouTubers were claiming this was a deleted, this was a storyboard of a climax for a scrap version of the third Spongebob movie, but I'm guessing a lot of people didn't actually get their facts straight. They were just making up stories, because obviously this wasn't a scrap scene from a scrapped third Spongebob movie. This was flat out a leaked storyboard for an upcoming Sandy Cheeks movie, because the visuals of this scene matched directly with those storyboards. And so, who knows though, maybe this was originally meant for a third SpongeBob movie, but despite how they scrapped the film, maybe they liked the idea of this laboratory scene, and they wanted to repurpose it into another movie, and they thought maybe it would work perfectly with the Sandy Cheeks movie. Hard to say, but so yeah, the original SpongeBob is supposedly dead now, and all that remains of him are all these multiple high-pitched laughing copies of SpongeBob, and everyone mourns the loss of SpongeBob at this point. Sue's pug manages to knock over the container, keeping all the tiny SpongeBobs, and they all manage to break free. And so, meanwhile, one of the little SpongeBobs goes to Sandy in her cage. Sandy just slowly starts walking on the hamster wheel, feeling like she's better off being a useless rodent than a scientist. And the little SpongeBob tries encouraging her to shape up and help save Bikini Bottom. He's saying how, Bikini Bottom needs her and she needs them. And he mentions how all of Bikini Bottom is her family and they're counting on her. And so Sandy manages to, get cheered up by SpongeBob's heartfelt speech, and she ends up coming up with a plan to fight back. And so she manages to get on the back of Sue's robotic body, and she starts causing her to go haywire. And eventually it leads to Sue's head popping off, and it flings off, and it lands right in the mouth of one of her CGI monster fish pets. However, because this is a kid's movie, the fish doesn't actually eat her. Instead, it just holds her head in his mouth. And we get this really weird scene where Sue's then, looking up at the fish and saying, how she's now a fish. It's really stupid. But, so Mr. Krabs notices that when the little SpongeBobs bump into each other, they merge into a bigger SpongeBob. And so he tells everyone to gather all the SpongeBobs and merge them together, so in hopes of getting SpongeBob back, and everyone succeeds, and SpongeBob returns back to his old form and size. But the globe holding Bikini Bottom starts leaking, and they have to try to get it back to the ocean in its original spot before it cracks and everyone dries up in the Texas air. And so Sandy figures she's going to need help from her family, so she tries doing the Cheeks family whistle, but she lost a tooth during all this madness, and she can't do the whistle anymore. So SpongeBob dramatically tries doing it, and he succeeds. Both Sandy's family and her family in Bikini Bottom, they work together to try to get Bikini Bottom back to the ocean. They manage to build some kind of rocket contraption that can be powered by running on it. And so she has her family and her friends at Bikini Bottom running at the same time in order to power the device in order to get the globe of Bikini Bottom back to the ocean. And so they manage to succeed as they crash land back into the ocean, perfectly realigning to where they need to be. And the movie ends with Mr. Krabs hosting a family circus at the Krusty Krab, featuring Sandy and her family, as Sandy and her friends reprise the film's opening song, and that's the end of the movie. And so, like I said, I don't think the movie's as bad as people are making it out. It is a very messy film, though. Like, I can't even say it's technically a good movie, but I found it to be a guilty pleasure, though. I thought it was fun. I can definitely imagine kids would really get a lot of fun out of this. And, that's really what shocks me about this, because, I hate modern SpongeBob. I cannot stand most everything past season 10, and I just hate how over-the-top random and nonsensical it's gotten, how over-the-top gross it's gotten, how the characters are all just constantly making these cross-eyed, stupid looks, and it's just nothing but the characters constantly shouting. It's like there's no clever writing anymore. It relies too much on just past nostalgia without understanding why people love that nostalgia to begin with. And, don't get me started on the Patrick Star Show either. It's just like it's basically the worst aspects of modern SpongeBob multiplied to an even more annoying degree. And so the fact that I was able to watch the Sandy Cheeks movie, and while it is really crazy, it still somewhat reminded me more of the SpongeBob I grew up with. It's like, I watch modern SpongeBob and I wonder, how is any kid supposed to grow attachment to the show? I can look back at the original show and I can point out why it appealed to so many kids and even why it appealed to so many adults. But you just watch the modern SpongeBob where it's just so brain dead nonsensical. It's like, how can kids even find this entertaining? And so I can watch the Sandy Cheeks movie with all my hatred of current SpongeBob, and I can see why kids would like this. And yeah, I don't know. I just didn't find the movie as bad as everyone else did. I do admit it is a flawed mess. There are parts in this movie that don't necessarily need to be there. But I somehow found this more entertaining than the SpongeBob movie sequels themselves, especially Sponge on the Run. That was kind of disappointing. Anyways, here's how I would have done a Texas or Sandy Cheeks themed SpongeBob movie. My idea has a lot of similar ideas, but very different execution. So imagine the movie opening up where Sandy bursts into the Krusty Krab or somewhere in Bikini Bottom, and she wants everyone's attention as she has a very important announcement to make. And she reveals how all her years of research as a marine biologist led to this moment, where she reveals that she unveiled to her bosses back at her job in Texas that with all her research, she wants to make a place that can try to unite both land creatures and sea creatures. And so she proposes a theme park that it takes place in Texas, but it's completely underwater. So think of it like the opposite of Sandy's Tree Dome. Instead of a dome filled with air, it's a dome filled with water up on the surface. And so she wants to make a park where land creatures can dress up in scuba gear and they can explore the ocean in the comfort of Texas. And so she wants to help land creatures be introduced to all the wonderful things she's discovered in Bikini Bottom, like jellyfishing, SpongeBob's bubble blowing, and she even wants Mr. Krabs to endorse the Krabby Patty to be officially sold there. Mr. Krabs loves the idea of spreading the Krabby Patty to a wider audience. And so, of course, he's in if that means more money. And so SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward are invited to go see the grand opening of the park. Well, not necessarily the grand opening, but mainly the testing phase. They're able to see it early and try to get feedback on it. Meanwhile, Plankton overhears all of this, and he decides to sneak along and follow them to Texas to try to, find a way to get the Krabby Patty formula from there. Meanwhile, while the gang are, finding a way to get to Texas, Sandy reveals a bit of her backstory to SpongeBob, because she reveals how she's inviting her parents to meet her at the park, and she's really nervous about it because, her father was never very supportive of her decision to move out into the ocean. And so we'd get like a flashback where it showed her as a little girl, and we see how, although she was really good at the kind of lifestyle her parents expected from her, like being a rodeo star, learning how to play the guitar, or, doing ranch stuff like farming and cattle roping. She had a fascination with the ocean. She even would talk to sea creatures. Like whenever people would see like a fish tank or something, she'd go up to them, say hi to them. And so we'd see like how all the other kids would laugh at her and make fun of her. And so over the years, Sandy felt really different. It's like everyone tells her she belongs in Texas, but her heart feels like she belongs in the ocean. And so when she gets offered a job to work as a marine biologist, she takes that offer. And her mom was very supportive of the idea. Her dad, however, did not like the idea of her just goofing around with fish all day. He thinks it's nonsense. She should stick to what she's good at. And so, Sandy ends up having to leave the ocean on bad terms with her dad, unfortunately. And so she's hoping that after all these years, her dad can finally warm up and he can come to this park and hopefully learn something about why she loves the ocean. She's hoping to share her love of the ocean with him and hoping he can find something to love in return. And so, yeah, that's obviously a lot more different than how the SpongeBob Sandy Cheeks movie handled it. So I'm not saying I wanted this movie to be a drama, per se. I mostly want it to be a comedy, but I still would have loved to have a little bit more of a reason for people to personally connect with these characters. Keeping it true to SpongeBob, but loosening up a little bit. And so, anyways, as the gang arrive at the park, we see them get into a lot of goofy shenanigans as they explore the park and they interact with a lot of land creatures they've never seen or heard of. And we get situations like everyone being fascinated with Squidward. And Squidward is just like flattered by all this because he points out how nobody in Bikini Bottom gives a care about him. And so Squidward's just absorbing the attention of everyone, thinking he looks amazing. So it'd be kind of similar to like when people go to an aquarium and they see an octopus for the first time and they're amazed by how freaky they look, And so Squidward would be getting that attention. He'd be eating it up. You'd see how the Krabby Patty is very popular and how the demand for it is more overwhelming than Mr. Krabs anticipated. We'd get some scenes of like meanwhile, like Sandy, she takes SpongeBob and Patrick outside of the park for a bit to show the actual world of Texas and where she grew up. And so we'd get some fun and exciting or action-packed scenes of the characters goofing off and many dangerous situations. And however, Sandy would cross paths with like an old foe from the past. Let's just say it was like an outlaw coyote. Let's just call him Kyle Yote. So basically just like a coyote in like a cowboy hat, and he just looks really intimidating, and he's surrounded by like a gang of other outlaw animals. And so we see how Kyle, he has like bad blood with Sandy because apparently in the past he and his gang have constantly tried invading their ranch and stealing their cattle, but Sandy and her family would always fend off the cattle and scare the coyote and his gang off. So we see like how Kyle tries attacking Sandy, SpongeBob, and Patrick, but Sandy's able to outsmart him and his gang, and they manage to make it out safely. So Plankton was able to see and overhear all this, and so he proposes a plan with Kyle Yote. And so, of course, like the coyote and his gang would laugh at Plankton for his tiny size, until Plankton mentions how he has the ultimate plan in getting back at Sandy. And so Plankton reveals how Sandy has like this big theme park opening, and he proposes a plan to crash it, and he presents them with the blueprints of an invention he's been wanting to make, and he's asking if they can help him build it in an efficient and timely manner. And so they strike a deal and they team up. And so later on in the film, we'd see where Sandy's family finally meet up, and so we see them getting a tour of the park. And so we see how the rest of Sandy's family is absolutely enjoying this experience, like learning how to jellyfish and eating a Krabby Patty. But we see how Sandy's dad is just not caring about any of it. And so things will eventually escalate to where Sandy and her dad get into a big argument. But while this is happening, suddenly, like, the dome that is keeping the park underwater, it crashes open as Plankton and Kyle appear in a giant mechanical bowl. like think of it like a giant weaponized tank, but it's shaped like a bowl. And so they burst in and they start trashing the place and raiding the place. And Sandy ends up fighting Kyle one-on-one. We get like some action-packed parts of them like fighting across the theme park. Like think of it like kind of like train fights, but they might be like fighting on a roller coaster, then fighting on a Ferris wheel. Just all this crazy fast-paced fight scenes. And then we get like a really suspenseful part where when it looks like Sandy has the upper hand, she manages to get taken down at one point, and Kyle, he has her pinned to the ground. He stomps on her helmet and cracks it, causing Sandy to start drowning. And so we then see Sandy would then witness Kyle kidnapping her family, loading them into the metal bowl, and driving off as Sandy fades out. So eventually SpongeBob is able to come out of hiding. He sees Sandy drowning, and he manages to drag her out of there back onto the land surface so she can breathe again. And so after all this, Sandy feels defeated, but SpongeBob, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, and even Squidward try cheering her up. So meanwhile, Sandy finds a message that was left on her helmet, and it says to bring the Krabby Patty formula to her family ranch if she ever wants to see her family again. So Sandy wants the group to be basically like a distraction for Kyle and his gang, while Sandy tries sneaking around to free her family. Sandy manages to succeed in saving her family as her dad apologizes for everything. The two make up. But meanwhile, eventually they all get exposed, and so we get like a big climatic fight like on the ranch. And so it could be both funny and action-packed. Like we could get like a moment where Patrick lets loose like all the cattle, and he starts riding them to ram through a bunch of Kyle's gang, and meanwhile we'd get like another one-on-one with Sandy as she's fighting off Kyle, but this time she has her family backing her up, and so they all manage to defeat Kyle and his gang. And Plankton, they manage to capture them and leave them for the authorities to deal with. And so it'll cut down like a few months later, and it's shown how the park finally reopened. And so we see Sandy being both flattered and amazed that her dream finally came true, as her park turns out to be a success, and she's happy to see a bunch of land creatures and sea creatures peacefully learning from each other and enjoying their experiences. And so SpongeBob feels like now that Sandy's dream came true, he feels like she has no reason to come back to Bikini Bottom, and he prepares to say farewell to her, but Sandy reveals that she's not going anywhere. Because while she loves both Texas and this theme park, she reveals how, she loves her home at Bikini Bottom, and that's where she plans on staying. And so she manages to get like a heartfelt farewell with her parents and the rest of her family as she adventures back home with SpongeBob and the gang back to Bikini Bottom. So yeah, I know it's not perfect. It might sound pretty cliche here and there. But these were only bits and pieces of, things I've been brewing up for years. Like, these are ideas I've had since I was a kid, and just ideas I would have loved to have seen in a SpongeBob movie. And so it's not all well thought out. It's more like bullet points or main ideas I would love to see in a film, but it's obviously not fully fleshed out. But feel free to let me know if you liked my idea for a SpongeBob Texas movie, if you thought that would have been better than the one we actually got. But so I'm not going to bash this Sandy Cheeks movie for not being the entire vision I had. I mean, I was still surprised to see a lot of similarities, though. We finally got a movie where SpongeBob got to witness Texas alongside Sandy. We finally got to meet her family. We had a plot that somewhat revolved around Sandy's research somehow kicking in. Not quite, except in the official movie's case, it was used as like a conflict, where for me, it would have kicked off the entire plot, where Sandy revealed the whole reason she was doing all this research was to try to make a theme park where land creatures and sea creatures can become closer together. So it's not only a theme park, but it's also a movement. And I don't know, I just would have loved to have seen a movie like this. Something that goes beyond what the SpongeBob show has done before, but still can wrap it up in a way where it can keep the original show's continuity in order, Yeah, but overall, the Sandy Cheeks movie, it is a mixed mess of a movie. I still had a lot of fun with it, though. I'd at least say it's the second best SpongeBob movie, but it doesn't come close to being as good as the first SpongeBob movie. But it was better than what the internet was letting it on to. It is technically a bad movie though. Like if you were to break down like all the flaws it has, all the plot holes, it doesn't make for a good story, but it's still a fun one at that. If I were to review it with a score, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 maybe. Anyways, that's all I have to show for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time, and have a great day.